How is everyone doing today? Welcome back to another episode of The Banker Next Door. I am your host, Dr. Joe Berquist. So today we're going to be taking a look at a very interesting article in Bank Director looking at how can you best cultivate talent in the C-suite, a question that has vexed many a banker and many executive for that matter for many, many years. So fascinating topic. So we are going to dive into this article here. So two CEOs discuss how their banks cultivate C-suite talent. The heads of B1 Bank and Lake City Bank share their perspectives on hiring outside the industry, evolving skills at the top, and connecting the board with senior leadership. So every bank needs the right people to grow and move its strategy forward, particularly in the C-suite. But planning for those roles is often a challenge. Most executive leadership positions require specialized expertise that's tough to find in other industries. And the skills that senior leaders need to change as a bank grows larger and faces more regulatory scrutiny. David Finley, CEO of 6.9 billion Lakeland Financial Corp in Warsaw, Indiana, and Jude Melville, CEO of the 7.9 billion Business First Bank shares in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, recently talked with Laura Alex, Director of Research at Bank Director, about how they approach these dynamics. Both banks share a strong focus on talent and leadership, running internal training programs and offering rotational work to high potential bankers. So this goes through a series of questions. So we'll go through the questions and then the answers. So again, BD is Bank Director. So BD says, most of our survey respondents say their bank hasn't filled a senior role with talent sourced outside of the industry. What are your experiences and thoughts on this? And Melville responds, I'm absolutely open to the idea of bringing folks in from outside the industry. I do think that there are certain roles that are easier to bring in somebody from the outside than others. Obviously, it's difficult to bring in somebody to be your chief credit officer who's never been around a bank. But I think for roles like marketing, for example, it actually would be pretty exciting to have somebody from outside with a fresh pair of eyes. As we figure out how to take on some of the technological challenges and opportunities that we've had in the next decade, I think it'll be more and more relevant to bring in people from the outside. We don't have as much internal talent on that front as you might think, and the world's quickly changing, so we'll have to change with it. And then Finley says, when I think about the external hiring over the last several years for roles like our chief technology officer, we've benefited tremendously from bringing in a set of eyes that does not come from the inside organization, but comes from the industry with ideas and innovations that are different from what we've been doing. So again, I love these comments, and I think this is absolutely correct. I think that, there are some roles that are very difficult. Like, again, chief credit officer, chief lending officer, perhaps a chief risk officer, very difficult to bring people in from the outside who have never dealt with banking before. But yes, I mean, marketing, HR, even a CFO can come from outside the world of banking. You don't need to necessarily be in the world of banking to be a great CFO. You need to have great accounting skills. A lot depends on, are you privately held or publicly traded? I mean, if you're a publicly traded bank and you're a rather larger bank, like say you're $5 or $10 billion in asset size, that may or may not prove challenging because, you may need a CFO who's very adept at dealing with the public, dealing with financial analysts, like being on all kinds of when you put out your call reports, doing that kind of media interaction when you're raising capital, maybe doing some dog and pony shows on Wall Street and to things like that. You might need somebody who comes from that has had experience running or being the CFO at a publicly traded company to understand some of those things, some of the more nuanced aspects, if you will, of being a CFO. But again, don't necessarily need to be from a bank. They could kind of learn the ins and outs of the banking business, I think. But I think with certain roles, again, like a chief lending officer, a chief credit officer, a chief risk officer, it's kind of hard for them to do their job if they don't really understand the intricacy of developing, building, maintaining, running a loan portfolio and analyzing the risk that's inside that portfolio, really understanding how a bank does that, lending officer, developing business, selling those loan products, there's a lot that goes into that. But let's go on to the next question here. So how do the skills and qualities needed in the C-suite change as a bank grows, particularly from 1 billion to 10 billion in assets? Excellent question. So Finley says, when we hit the 5 billion mark, we said that we need to make sure when we get to 10 billion that we were already managing ourselves like a $10 billion bank. So the challenges that come with crossing that threshold have already been addressed. The staff has been added, the resources have been allocated, and the technology has been invested in. When we look at our executive leadership team, do the people in that room have the ability to understand what the evolution of the business will be if you get larger? When can you look at your control environment, the policies and procedures, and know that those have matured along with the balance sheet? And then Melville added, there are skills that I think need to be learned as you get bigger. One is managing through data. When we are all getting started, whether that be as a commercial banker who has an individual portfolio, or in our case, a de novo bank, you have a limited number of clients and a limited number of employees. It's about people and specific relationships. The next step is managing through processes. The only way to make sure you're doing that correctly is to be comfortable with data. A lot of being over 10 billion is being able to share with your regulators, this is the data from our bank. If it's not in the data, then it's not real. The good news is that preparing to do that makes you better internally, because you need to do it whether you want to see it or not. You don't want to lose the relationships, but there's a balance between the two. That's one skill set that I think leaders have to learn over time as your organization gets bigger. So, it is very fascinating, because I will say that there is an enormous difference between running a $1 billion bank versus running a $10 billion bank. In a certain respect, it may not seem like that big a deal. It is a bigger deal. And I think that there are a lot of executives that can grow and evolve with the bank. I also think that there's some people that may not be able to do that their expertise really may be in running just a smaller organization, a bank that's, under 5 billion in assets, and that, stepping up to a $10 billion bank, they may not be the right person to handle that larger organization. And we have hundreds of cases, if not thousands of cases of this, as banks have grown and kind of learned these lessons over time. Now, how do you help new directors understand the dynamics of your C-suite? So Finley says, we have our entire management committee, all 9 of them sit in every board meeting and on committee meetings. We've got multiple staff in those as well. It's important for the directors to have the interaction with the key leaders within the bank. By exposing the directors to not only the management committee, but other people deeper into the organization, that's the best way you could possibly give them the confidence that they have the right people in the right positions. And then Melville added, it really takes time and exposure. When I've served on other boards, there's no way that I can know that the company or that organization as well as the leadership does. My job as a board member is to make sure that I feel comfortable that we have the right people in place, and that if we have the right people in place, then things are going to work out. The more I can make the board feel comfortable through exposure to those people, that they are the right people, then the better board members should feel about the organization. Yes. Absolutely agree with some of those sentiments. And I will say that it does get very tricky, because your board members are not there to run the day-to-day operations of the bank or the business, right? Like the board members are just primarily there for oversight. They're there to, let the management team do their job, but they're there to make sure that the management team is doing what they're saying they're doing. Like, in other words, if the management team comes out and lays out the strategy for the bank and says, this is what we're doing, this is what, and then, okay, are you carrying that out? Also, if something's not going right, how are you going to fix it? And then, are there checks and balances in place? Do we have different auditing committees? Are we looking at different things that are going on out there? That's really the role of the board member. However, what I also say, is it beneficial that the board get to know other people in the organization, other people in the company? Because there's a lot of key people in the organization that do not sit in the C-suite or are not part of the executive team. Is it important for the board to get to know some of those people? And I would say, yes, it absolutely is. It depends on what the strategy of the bank is. Like, in other words, if your primary thing is commercial lending and you have a bunch of commercial lenders, I think it'd probably be a good idea for the board members to get together with some of those commercial lenders at least a couple of times a year, just to begin to, to know them, begin to develop that relationship. How can the board member help them out? How can they help them grow business or get business into the bank? That kind of thing. Also, if it's somebody who runs payments or runs the cash management department for the bank, hey, if this is a key person, we need to understand who this person is, what drives them, what's what makes them this great employee. So again, I see a lot of benefit in that. And again, I think you could do that in ways that the board is not, stepping on the toes of senior management or is not necessarily stepping over their bounds. Again, I think you design things, you design an event where you have all the board members there, maybe once or twice a year, and you bring in a bunch of these key employees, and maybe you just break bread together. Maybe you do a lunch or a dinner or something, and you just and you allow time for mingling. You just allow them time to just go around and talk to each other, get to know each other a little bit, some type of a corporate function. These are always great things to do and great things to have. But I just, but again, I love this. And it gets back to that idea of how do you develop your C-suite at the end of the day? How do you develop people over a long period of time? And I think it is a long period of time. It's not a short period. I think if you have an employee that you like, you have to spend at least a few years prepping them and getting them ready to take over that senior level job. It's not something that somebody can just dive right into day one. And it does get interesting because, again, as the article said at the beginning, I do think that banks would really benefit from bringing in people from outside in certain roles, because I think they could bring a lot of perspective and a lot of different just experience, different vibe, a different way of looking at things to the table, which could be tremendously beneficial. But at the same time, there's certain things that you just need people that have been, you need some of that gray hair. You need some people that have been around for 20, 30, 40 years that really, know the business. They live, breathe, eat, sleep that business, 24/7, 365, because a lot of things, unfortunately, again, I go back to lending. A lot of lending is as much of an art as it is a science. It's understanding the psychology of the person across the table from you. Will this person hurt you? Are they a good person? Are they okay? Will they stand by you if things get tough? If they have a problem, are they gonna work it out? Or are they just gonna fold and file bankruptcy and hand you the keys back? Like, there's a lot that you need to understand. And so and it gets back, as they say, at the end of the day, there's no substitute for experience. So, but with that being said, I hope you found this topic interesting. I will no doubt have a lot more to say on, C-suite development and C-suite roles and things as the podcast continues to move forward in the weeks, months, hopefully years ahead. But I'll wrap up by saying, if you like this episode, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, as that really helps the channel. Remember, we are on YouTube, Rumble, and all major podcast platforms. Please be sure to leave your comments down below, as I always love getting back to everybody. And as always, make sure to check out some of the other content on the channel. And I would say, if you have not checked out BND Strategy Room live stream on YouTube Saturday nights at 8 o'clock, please go on and check that out, as that is the main show of the channel. But with that being said, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day out there, and I will see everyone again real soon.